Professor Craig Watkins, thank you very much for joining us for the IC² Institute Best Practices Video Library. We're really glad to have you on this call, but also just in general as a supporter, ally, and a researcher that works in the similar space that we do. So welcome. And can you please just begin with introducing yourself and some of the research that you do here at the University of Texas?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. And so I am faculty in the Moody College of Communication, and I'm also the director of a relatively new initiative in the College of Communication called the Institute for Media Innovation. And I describe the Institute really as a kind of research and design hub. And so we do research on what we think are some of the more relevant, pressing, kind of cutting edge questions related to this merger between technology and innovation and the future of work and media. And then so that may be asking questions about, biases in artificial intelligence, or the ways in which technology sort of influence how we think about the future of work. It might be another example. But the design element, right, is something that I'm just really excited about, because in addition to asking sort of probing or critical questions about media and technology, the Institute is also built to try to design and to build and participate in that future of innovation and technology. So if it's designing a digital platform for mental health, for example, or based on some work that we've been doing this summer on COVID, which we'll probably get a chance to talk about, designing recommendations and policies that might help schools and communities and organizations deal more effectively with a post-COVID future.
Let's speak first about co-working and the recent research that you've done, and co-working in non-major urban areas in particular. When we go out there, that's where IC² is focused on. Could you tell us some of the observations you've had and some of the key takeaways and findings?
Yeah, we've had a unique opportunity. So IC² introduced us to an organization on the East Coast, the Center for Rural Innovation. And so we've had a series of meetings with them, really starting toward the end of last year and throughout the beginning of this year. And they introduced us to what they call ecosystem leaders. And these are people who have either built or manage co-working spaces in small and rural towns. And this group of ecosystem leaders get together periodically and just sort of talk about the challenges that they face and the opportunities they face trying to create co-working spaces in their respective communities. So we met with that group initially. We did kind of like a virtual kind of online focus group with them. It was really just a conversation to begin to start being introduced to them and then getting a chance to meet us. And then we had individual conversations with each of those ecosystem leaders. It's about 8 or 9 leaders specifically. And then each of those leaders introduced us to members who participate in their own respective co-working spaces. And so we had an opportunity to also get the perspective of those who not only build, manage, and design co-working spaces, but those who use co-working spaces as well. And so part of what we were interested in, right, are, what are the challenges that these ecosystem leaders face, users of co-working spaces face in small and rural towns? What are the opportunities? And then, of course, how have they had to readjust their vision, and as they project forward in a post-COVID future, the role that co-working spaces might play in these respective communities. Generally speaking, most of the ecosystem leaders see these spaces as a unique opportunity to really facilitate the cultivation of a kind of innovation and entrepreneurial ethos in their respective communities. And so they become hubs, if you will, for bringing people together and then connecting those aspiring entrepreneurs to other stakeholders in the community, chambers of commerce. Most of these organizations tend to have a relationship to a local university, for example. So there is dialogue and there's sort of mutual and shared purpose in that way. But the idea, right, is that these become places where people within the community who have ideas that can in some ways be a part of building the future of rural and small town economies. We also get the sense that the launch of these spaces has been critical insofar as many of the ecosystem leaders see them as an opportunity to maintain talent that might otherwise flee these communities. So we've heard, for years now about the talent drain that rural communities face. So to the extent that you can design hubs and spaces and cultures and ecosystems that are designed right to sort of think about the future, that offer access to different forms of capital, human capital, social capital, technological capital, because we know that broadband, can be really difficult, right, in rural communities. Providing access to reliable broadband, other kinds of reliable resources and services, really begins to create, right, these sort of aspirations that people might have that can bring both innovation, ingenuity, and economic development to these respective communities.
You hit upon a very big point, Dr. Watkins, which is this workforce retraining or retention of young people and youth, and how co-working spaces can play a major role in that, and also at the same time, knock out some of the other stuff like broadband. In your work that you sent us, you speak of the 2.0, the new model, especially now post-pandemic. How these spaces themselves are redesigning themselves and having a sort of organic shift to adapt to the new foreseeable future of work. Could you speak more on this new model and how that could actually be something that a community could think about and actually help and support and realize?
The sort of 2.0 model, in some ways, right, is sort of a redefinition of the possible role that these spaces can play in a post-COVID future. So definitely thinking about, and some of the organizations that we met with were already thinking about the need to attract more diverse talent, if that's in terms of race and ethnicity, focusing primarily on women entrepreneurs, for instance. And I think there's a greater recognition of the need to continue doing that and sort of expanding that vision of who co-working spaces attract and who can bring sort of ingenuity to those spaces. One of the other interesting developments that we've heard over and over again is moving a bit away from the kind of open model or open concept, where you have people just sort of next to each other, rubbing elbows, again, sharing ideas, sharing drinks, sharing, the same sort of, tools with each other. And there's more of a model towards private offices. And what a lot of co-working spaces tell us is that they're already, receiving interest from, let's say, remote workers who are largely working from home now, but still looking for an office space or still looking for somewhere beyond the home, the home office to work and to pursue their interests. And these spaces, right, again, because they offer reliable internet, fast speed internet, many of these co-working spaces are also beginning to, create, spaces where you can hold virtual meetings like this. That means enhancing their technological infrastructure to do, virtual meetings, to do podcasting, for example. And so there's just a recognition that even though the original model has been disrupted, that this new model certainly offers life and opportunity for those who manage and design these spaces in a post-COVID future.
And I remember reading a bit about having green rooms where there's fancy cameras and lighting. It was very exciting because I think we're trying to build something like that at IC² and also upstairs. I guess I would want to tie something we were speaking about before we started recording, which is a dimension of educating and training and just letting the community know what is this about? Is that also something that's necessary right now also? I mean, folks in the urban centers know about co-working spaces. Do you think that when we go out of these major areas, there's still that element of letting folks know what this is and what benefits it could bring to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. That was something that resonated, quite clearly, throughout our depth interviews with a lot of the ecosystem leaders. And that is almost virtually, everyone that we spoke to, and we spoke to all of the leaders in this group that sort of convenes regularly, that when they first began to develop and create their co-working space, that they had to do a lot of sort of community-oriented education around, what is co-working, and what role could it play in this community, and why the community should be interested in it. And that meant, right, doing a lot of programming, doing a lot of outreach, meeting with different stakeholders, meeting with people in the community. But that's certainly something that I think stakeholders in Texas will need to think about. One, the extent to which these spaces remain viable, and most people tell us, right, that co-working is not going to be eliminated because of the pandemic, but in fact will take on a new kind of urgency and yet a new role in a post-COVID future. But before that can happen, it becomes really important to do that kind of educational work to help people to get a vision and an understanding of what these spaces might be in their respective communities. And it can vary, right, from community to community, based on the population, based on the talent, based on the sectors, based on the kinds of industries, whether or not there's a local university nearby, whether or not there's private-public partnerships. But something that we learned is that it was really important to do a lot of sort of educational work at the beginning, just to sort of give people a better understanding of the role that these kinds of spaces can play in terms of catalyzing economic development.